Let me at this point sort of open the floor up for discussion and collect a few questions first and then come back to another round of questions from my side. Any questions from the students which does not jeopardize us? Yeah. Yeah.
Is this working?
No, it's working.
Yeah, so you talk about learning things online and all of that, but that requires a certain amount of commitment from let's say if there's a class of 40 students. So you need 40 students who are going to be willing to do that, because I'm in this neighborhood program right now. I can tell you the level of sincerity that I work with, that some of the people, I have people who have got more sincerity than me, that's there too. But I've got, the sincerity level varies among students, right? So how do you make the students so interested in the subject that they would actually, once you go out of the class at home, go home, instead of, opening up, let's say, Instagram or something, they actually open up the Walter Lewin video. And if you, after 10 or 15 of those, you do understand that they're great and you do it. But the first 10, 15, you have to get them interested, to get them hooked onto the thing. So what can a teacher do to do that? And what can we as students, think about to actually have that level of commitment to actually read a bit something, watch a video? Because we get free readings in class already, we get that, but most of us don't do it.
Thank you for the honesty.
Yeah, I share your experience, because when I was a physics student, I hardly ever attended classes. I cut all my classes, I went to the library and learned things on my own. Now, I wasn't lazy, I was learning. And this was because the formal education made learning painful for me, and I'm pretty sure that is so for you too. But so the first responsibility of a teacher is to make this enjoyable, exciting. By shifting the focus into questions, problems that students want to investigate. And I've seen this effect in students who hate math, or students who think that they are not capable of doing math, transform into math addicts. They come and ask you, can you give us more problems of that kind? So select tasks which students find enjoyable, so that the distinction between playing and learning disappears. Learning is no longer a chore. Learning is what you want to do. If you are prevented from learning, you get frustrated. So if I attend a wedding party, I get very frustrated, stressed out, because I think I'm wasting my time. I should have spent that time on something else. So if you can convert students into learning addicts, that's the first step. It is possible that in a class of 40 students, not everybody would be interested in the same problems. So give different kinds of things that would appeal to all students. So it's a kind of shotgun approach. So of the 20 problems or 20 questions that you ask, all students should find at least 5 to 8 problems interesting, and others they will learn from others. So that's a challenge for the teacher. Get them addicted, and it is not difficult to get students addicted to learning.
About that, you just said you can develop an interest, but there are many students which I call especially blindfolded students who don't follow their own what they really like. They are like, okay, my parents are telling me to pursue engineering, so they'll just push me into engineering, and that's what they do. So I don't think that they're going to develop an interest in that. So what about those kind of students? What can we do for them? Because as a teacher, the most we can do is we can just tell them that pursue whatever you like, but it's very hard to convince them. So do you have any plan of what we can do about those students who are blindfolded by someone?
Yeah. So the situation is like this. Suppose you are a ballet teacher, and you have a class of students who have never seen dance in their life. Okay? This is exactly the situation that a math teacher faces. Students who have gone through 12 years of education have never had the experience of doing math. They've only had the problems of making mathematical calculations. They have never had the experience of mathematical thinking. So the first thing that the ballet teacher should do is to expose students to dance of various kinds. Experience, not convince them. Let them have the pleasure of doing this. So if you don't like eggplants because you have never eaten eggplants, the first thing to do is to get them to eat eggplants. Have the experience, decide for themselves whether they like it or not. As in the case of ballet, as in the case of mathematical thinking. And my experience has been that if you expose them to real math and real science and real philosophy, most of them resonate. The reason why they think they don't like it is because they have never had those experiences. It's not a matter of convincing them. So exposure to what is exciting in academic world, and you get most students. We don't have to convince them. They would beg you to help you learn more of that. Go ahead, sir.
My question is that if we see in history of our nation, our first education minister Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, he actually didn't have any formal education. He was very knowledgeable and read things on his own. If we go even back when travelers used to come to India, there was a traveler called Al-Biruni. Basically he was from a religious scholar to scientist to a philosopher, he was all, but he even didn't have any formal education. But how we recreate these kind of things in a formal college system? How do we do that? These people learned it on their own, but how can we implement these things in a college?
I'm not quite sure I understood your question. Can you, what exactly is it? Can you restate it?
So my question is that throughout history there are people who have learned things on their own, and they have the transdisciplinary knowledge that you were talking about.
Yeah.
If we see most of the philosophers, they had transdisciplinary knowledge, but how do we recreate that kind of ecosystem in a university or in any formal institution? How do we do that?
Okay. It's twofold answer. One is experience of what is exciting in the academic terrain, what is exciting about mathematics, what is exciting about science, the scientific way of thinking, the philosophical way of thinking, mathematical way of thinking, the linguist's way of thinking, and so on. That's one. So that they will learn on their own. The other is to help them to develop strategies to learn on their own. So for example, how would you learn from the internet? How would you distinguish what is poisonous and what is valuable on the internet? That requires some help from the teacher. How do you read? I find that most college students don't know how to read. I don't mean to say, reading, for example, a magazine article, but reading an article to find out what is the main claim of this article, what is the evidence provided by the article for that position, what is the structure of the article. So the good reading habits, students don't learn how to read, so they have English proficiency, but they do not have academic literacy to evaluate something that they read in a New York Times article, for example. These are things that we need to teach. We have to equip the students to develop academic literacy as opposed to English proficiency. I would say that of the university students, maybe about 5% have that ability, but the remaining students have to be empowered to do that. When I say 5%, I simply mean a very small percentage, not the exact number. They also have to be equipped with some of the transdisciplinary concepts. They have to get a taste of what it is, what the word theory means, what the word argument means, what the word evolution means, what the word structure, system, function. These are all transdisciplinary concepts. So at least a few they have to have a taste of, so that they can then look for transdisciplinary concepts on their own. So it's essentially a kind of initiation for a long journey, a lifelong journey. But you have to begin that somewhere and if the students are initiated into the art and craft of learning and inquiring and critical thinking, such that the rest of the journey they will undertake on their own. That's the only way I can think of.
So then, last. Oh, you had a question, yeah.
There are people at the back.
Sure.
Yeah.
Am I audible? Oh, okay. No, I'm audible. Yeah. I think the last question actually makes it easier for me to frame my question. I should start with saying that I was homeschooled for 7 or 8 years. Since the last 7 or 8 years I've been homeschooling, and when it occurred to me that I'll need a more formal setting for my education, because the most major thing I learned when I was homeschooling was that the spirit of inquiry, the spirit of being curious, is the most important educational leap you can ever have. That makes you interested in absolutely everything. You can connect things the way you would not have been able to connect before. But when it occurred to me that I will need some sort of formal, bit more structured regime, I found a lot of closed doors when it came to higher institutions, and besides, of course, a liberal arts education system like this. So I was just curious, are there other ways? I'm aware of a lot of alternative educative means when it comes to schooling. Are there such institutions besides liberal education colleges that you can think of, or that might come in the future, which can assist formal education that is interdisciplinary but not following the model of colleges?
If your question is, do the kinds of ideal systems of formal education that we are talking about, do they actually exist in India?
Yes, something like that.
Or abroad? I'm not sure if I should specify, if I should give names. So I will speak in generalities without giving. I think there are reasonably good institutions, very small in number. I'm not going to specify which institutions. Institutions which are better than others, that's what I can say. And I've seen pretty good examples of that outside India as well. So such institutions are feasible. So Finland, school education in Finland is multidisciplinary, not subject bound, but problem bound. So that is integrative in another sense, multidisciplinary integration. They don't go on to do transdisciplinary integration. As far as I know, transdisciplinary education doesn't exist anywhere in the world. But it is feasible if you change the syllabus, if you change the curriculum. Which is why I'm running around like a missionary for transdisciplinary education, hoping that someday that will happen. Maybe this will happen 50 years after my death, but it is still worth doing.
I think I can say as a homeschooler that a lot of us who are homeschooling perfectly agree with your ideology.
Yeah.
Someone there?
Hello. Sir, do you think the creativity in us is thereby compromised from the primary and secondary level itself? Our creativity is compromised or neglected from the primary and secondary level itself.
Yeah. My answer is yes, unfortunately, because education is made painful for primary school students. Imagine the following. If you teach a 5-year-old how to count 1, 2, 3, 4, for them saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 has no meaning. You might as well say boogildi, deagle-do, bagal-do, bak. Meaningless words. The 5-year-old does not understand the meaning of 4. So why teach them that the ordering? Ordering is only one of the properties of numbers. So if you help them to understand numbers first, it's a very complicated thing, it's not easy. And forget about the sequence, recitation of numbers or recitation of the names of months and stuff like that. And understanding numbers, very young children can have. In fact, there are experiments to show that even newborn babes have some sense of numbers. Crows have sense of numbers. So if you begin with that, what they already have, gradually develop understanding of numbers, and then the ordering of numbers and the number names and the number symbols should come only after all this is done, or while this is being done, if not at the end of it. Then learning is not painful, learning is actually considerable fun. It is enjoyable. So you are right in saying creativity is destroyed, because there is considerable creativity, imagination, insight in mathematics, in science. All these are completely forgotten.
Even the concepts that we learn in class 11 and 12, that are also, when we learn the enhanced version of it, now we learn it that in the way that the things we learn, like, it is not as it is. It has differences in reality. Like, it is not as the way we have been trained. Or
Yeah. This is the problem of the word-based thinking that was mentioned earlier. So for example, I'm pretty sure that all of you know the word triangle. But do you understand the concept of triangle? Let me demonstrate to you that there might be 1 or 2 people here in the audience, or maybe 5 faculty members, other than faculty members, 1 or 2 students. But let me challenge you and demonstrate to you that you don't really understand the concept of triangle. And here is my question. You have learned the concept of right angle. You have learned the concept of straight angle, right? 180 degrees. You learned this in primary school or secondary school. You have also learned the word right angle triangle. Now let me ask you, do straight angle triangles exist? How many people would say yes? Do they exist? How many people would say no, they don't exist? Okay, there is a difference of opinion. Let me put it this way, both answers are correct. So the question is not whether you believe that they exist or not, but what is your definition such that it follows that straight angle triangles do not exist, and what is your definition definition of triangle, such that they do exist? Work out both these questions, and you will take quite some time. But at the end of it, you will have a deeper understanding of the concept of triangle, which you don't have right now. It may also turn out that you don't understand the concept of straight line. Then this may come as shock to you, but after having taught various groups of students, I'm pretty sure that most of you don't understand the concept of straight line, or even the concept of line. So if these things are taken care of in early education, learning becomes non-painful, enjoyable and meaningful, and you become much faster. You can learn much more things on your own.
Just take a few questions around. One second.
Sir, I totally agree with you, and I do believe that there should be some changes in our system, and most of the people here do believe that. But how do we implement that change, or how do we execute it as a unit? Because everyone wants it, but no one is sending out to execute.
Okay, that's a difficult question. I'm not a very practical person. Okay, so all I can say is that here is a possible way of doing it. I don't know if it will work. One way of doing it is to change the nature of the examination questions. And if the nature of exam questions change, and if they test valuable learning, naturally the textbooks will change, what happens in the classroom will change, and so on and so on. But that, I think, is impossible. There are too many practical obstacles. Nobody's going to change that. You could change the syllabuses. I guess, the people in school boards are not going to do that. I have been struggling with this for the last 9 years after I came back to India. The only thing that I have found working is you go to an institution, a school or a college, and say, give me 2 hours a week. Give me 2 hours a week from class 1 to class 9. Leave class 10 for exam mugging and, question, that kind of learning. But 1 to 9. And build in valuable learning during those 2 hours. 2 hours a week is all we ask for. I think considerable progress can be made. By the end of this, students will become much better learners, much better thinkers, much better inquirers. And the same thing would apply to undergraduate education as well. So ask for a small fragment of time and introduce education as distinct from preparing for exams. They have to go side by side. Preparing for exams is necessary because of pragmatic reasons. Because if you don't do well in your 12th grade, you will not be able to go to higher education. You have to, that's part of life. You have to go through some pain. It's good. Pain is good for the soul. Yeah.
Good. I prefer your answer because I was told Thomas Kuhn, the philosopher of science, once threw up his hands in disbelief because he wanted to answer how do old theories die and new theories, how are they born? After a set of complicated answers, he said, you know what? The old scientists have to die. That's the only way of doing this. I hope you didn't have that in mind.
Hello, sir. Yeah. My name is Vikas and I'm a student of physics.
He's a faculty member.
Okay.
Don't get
That's
don't
why
get
you say you're a
misled.
student of physics.
So, we talk about critical thinking, joy of learning, very nice words, and they are quite motivating as well. But is it really feasible? Like on the one hand, the government policy, as you said, that it's all about like cultivate this curiosity among the students. But let's, and since I'm a physicist, or at least I claim to be one, let me take a simple example like the Newtonian formula, F equals ma, okay? And I'm taking this formula deliberately because I think no matter whether if somebody is from management or somebody from arts background, we all have studied this in class 9th or 10th, whenever. So, did we ever thought, how did Newton got this formula? If you read his book, Principia of Mathematica 1687, this formula is not there at all. And it's very difficult to figure it out where this formula comes from. Now, if I try to teach this to a bachelor degree student, it will take me at least 2 weeks to derive this, okay? I will have to go through the process of Tycho Brahe, Kepler's, because Kepler's data was with Newton and then he figured it out, this equation. Does our education system, both at the institute level and also according to the policymakers of our government, does it allow it? And moreover, like if I keep on doing this kind of exercise at a regular, like in a regular manner, will I ever be able to finish the syllabus? And regarding, as you said, that, okay, design the question paper to evaluate critical thinking. Now, most of these guys, when they will graduate from this university, they'll be appearing for GATE examination, GRE examination, where you have to train yourself. You may be a very good critical thinker, but you may not be able to score in those exams because you have to be like really fast. Like in BHU MSc entrance test, I remember 3 hours exam, 180 questions. Okay, so you have 1 minute per question. So my whole idea is that is it even feasible, or is it a practical approach to do this?
That's why I mentioned separating the two functions of educational institutions. One function is training students for exams. That's non-negotiable, that has to be done. So students have to answer questions in less than 2 minutes, less than a minute. Let's allocate some time, whatever time you want, allocate that. But I don't think you need the entire time for that. Carve out some time for education. Let's say, suppose it is physics. And suppose you say by the end of the 10th year, students should have the capacity to read, understand Einstein and Feld's book, Evolution of Physics. Now, this is an interesting book because this does not have a single formula. There is not a single piece of calculation, but it gives you a deep understanding of physics from a slightly historical, not fully historical, but more or less historical. Now, if that is the goal, then you have to allocate time for that. You have to prepare students to get there. And this can be done, as I said, if you allocate 2 hours, or if it is even a better school, 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week, some time allocate. And if the students read on their own Einstein and Feld in the 10th year and discuss it with the teachers, I'm not denying the need for making calculations, but that will be done in the other system. This is for the education that is of value to everybody, not simply for the physics specialist. Einstein and Feld is of considerable value for that. That is doable. It is not impossible. And I would assure you that a physicist who has read Einstein and Feld in the 10th grade, a future physicist, would be a much better physicist. Had I bumped into this book when I was an undergrad student in physics, I would have fallen in love with physics. I would not have pursued linguistics. I would have become a physicist. Whether that's a good thing or not doesn't matter. But it would have changed my life. And the reason is it gives you a deep understanding of physics. I bumped into this book after my PhD in physics, PhD in linguistics. That needn't be the case. Many physics haters can become physics lovers if you take this path. And this is not impossible. This is definitely feasible. The crucial part is separating exam syllabus from education syllabus. These are two different things. And they should both be pursued parallel.
Hi, so you've been talking about the importance of critical thinking and the Socratic method, so to say. But is it really necessary? Because in this current age, we have information and everything available at our fingertips. And I think it's the point in our history is not far away where we wouldn't have to do anything with the onset of artificial intelligence and machine learning, where we would have to really apply ourselves. So is critical thinking really that necessary?
I cannot justify my answer to the question in a couple of minutes, so I'll simply state an opinion. I don't think the so-called artificial intelligence is anywhere near human intelligence. And I can give you the reasons outside, but it'll take me a long time. So I'm not going to try that. And you're asking the question, is it necessary? That depends upon what it is needed for, necessary for something. The question to ask is, do you think it is desirable? Is it desirable that students have the capacity to think on their own? Or would you rather that they believe whatever other people tell them? You have to decide. Is it desirable that students have inquiry abilities? So these are questions of value. What is it that you value? Is it valuable for the next generation to be ethical? Or do you want a generation that is completely unethical? These are questions that educators have to address. And these are questions of value, not questions of necessity. It might become a question of necessity if humanity is going to commit suicide very soon. But even then, it becomes a question of value. Is it worth saving humanity? Is a question of value. So if you think that humanity is worth preserving, then it becomes necessary if it is a case that humanity is going to commit suicide or is going to destroy the planet. But otherwise, if those questions are not present, then it's a question of value. If you think rationality is valuable, if you think clarity and precision in thinking and communication are valuable things, then the answer is, yeah, if you do what is valuable in education. It is not a question of necessity.
You had something?
Hi, over here. My name is Aparajit. I teach history and I was trained in the history of science. I find your examples, especially when you talk about scientific dogma and other things, very, very interesting, because those are some of the things that we really need to tackle. I'm going to just put a sort of devil's advocate kind of position to you, because of course I totally endorse the need for making learning fun and practical and so on. But there is a school of thought which says that, you gave the example of learning how to count when you're in class 1 or whatever it is. There's a school of thought which says that, all the stuff that you learned without completely thinking about it or analyzing it at a younger stage acts as a kind of substrate on which your reason then works, right? So if you ask somebody what they think, whether it's possible to have a a straight angle triangle, they've already learnt some definition of straight angle and right angle, which you're working with, right? If you take an example of somebody like Ramanujan, for example, of course he's not your standard learner, but the argument goes that many of his contributions came from some kind of abstract intuition, which was a form of playing with formulae, and it's a moot point whether he would have been able to explain what the meaning of those series was in the real world, right? So is it possible to argue that you need a kind of almost kind of rote learning to act as a some kind of ballast for the kinds of things that you are trying to introduce? Is that a fair argument, or do you think that one can do away with that entirely?
Couple of things. One, at the beginning you talked about making learning fun. I wasn't talking about making learning fun, which is like entertainment. I was thinking about making learning exciting to the extent that students would want to do it. There's a huge difference between entertainment and excitement. That's just a matter of clarification. The other is there is also a distinction between rote learning and memory. There are things that you have to remember in order to be able to proceed next. I agree. But it doesn't have to be through rote learning. So consider the following situation. Suppose you want to teach Newton's theory of motion. There are two ways of doing it. One is to use the equations that you have in textbooks and teach them the equations. They will learn to make calculations without understanding the theory. The other solution will be to help them construct Newton's theory of gravity and motion on their own by giving them certain kinds of tasks, guiding them in a certain direction. It is feasible. This can be done with 8th grade, 9th grade students. But in the current existing system, what happens, students are given all these pieces of information. In an ideal system of education, they are not given any of that, but they construct some variant of Newton's theory of motion without the formal symbols, without the mathematics, purely through words. The next step will be to mathematicize it, to convert the conceptual theory into a formal theory. To give you another example, you can understand Galileo's laws of the simple pendulum by getting students to work out. And they will come up with that there is a correlation between the length of the pendulum and the period of the pendulum. This can be done. They do the experiments on their own. But to get the exact formula, that's a different thing. That can follow this one. That also is teachable to get the students to reconstruct it. Not exactly the formula that Galileo gave, but something equivalent. Then they can learn on their own. That's not difficult. In all these things, in the course of constructing these things, students would remember a large number of things. Their body of information that they have will be much greater than the body of information that they have in the current situation. So information, I am not denying the role of carrying the information in your mind, but it will be structured information. It will be information that is understood, information that is meaningful. That is not rote learning. So having information without rote learning, without memorizing, is what is important. So it's a very different take on it.
Sir, you just gave the example of why Earth is tilted as 23.5 degree. So it's like not reading the lines of the textbook, it's like reading between the lines. So as a student, how can we develop this feature of reading between the lines?
I don't know if I would say it is reading between the lines,
Like,
but it is like if you're thinking about learning how to read, it is how to structure the information in a text in such a way that it forms a coherent whole. It is connected to the purpose of the text. For example, if the purpose of the text is to make a claim to persuade you, then there is a certain structure of argument, unpacking the structure of the argument, evaluating the premises of the argument, evaluating the reasoning, and deciding for yourself whether you want to accept the claim or not. That is critical reading. That is not reading between lines. That is making sense of the pieces in the text, constructing a whole, structuring the text. That's very different. And if your question is, how do you learn that?
How to
The
think
only answer
just
is
out
by
of the box.
taking you through a process of doing that. I can't do that in a 2-minute answer. If you go to a website, there are many exercises of that kind that you will find on the website. So it has to be done through examples. I don't have a way of it. This is like asking, how do you teach ballet to somebody? You can only illustrate it by teaching ballet.
Oh, sorry, please go.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Hello, Professor Mohanan. My name is Murari Jha. I teach, I'm a history faculty. My question goes back to the student's question about, whether it is necessary to be critical, and your response about desirability of being critical, because if we need to question certain ethos, certain system which needs to be changed for the sake of humanity, for the sake of betterment of society, then probably we need to accept the desirability of being critical. Now my question is, probably I think, whether there is something in our society particularly which withhold us from being critical, especially the tradition of showing reverence towards elders, towards teachers, and therefore taking whatever we are given by them at face value. That is one. And secondly, do you recognize a pattern in the long-term history of recent, say, centuries or even a millennium, that there has been kind of cycles of society worldwide being more critical of the regime, about beliefs, about economic system, and so on and so forth. And there have been cycles in which society world over have been kind of less critical. So just a reflection on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I may not be able to give you a well-informed answer, so let me share with you my opinions on that on the basis of some understanding of history. So very clearly the period of Socrates, Plato, etc. in Greece, there was a time of challenge to authority, critical thinking, inquiry, thinking for themselves and so on. That was one period. And you find after that there is a gradual decline. And then it comes back during Renaissance and Enlightenment period. And then you find that the science at the beginning of 20th century is flourishing, at least among some of the best people in science. And perhaps in science education as well, early part of 20th century. And that produced some of the best scientists in the world. If you look at science education, again in the West, you find a gradual decline. Science has become dogma, even in the best institutions. Why these ups and downs happen, I don't know. I just observe that happens. It just happened. I can see that in my own specialization, theoretical linguistics, I find exactly the same decline. When I was a graduate student, this was in the late 70s, early 80s and so on, the whole theoretical linguistics, at least of the MIT tradition, was challenge authority and prove that your teachers are wrong. This was the culture in which I was brought up. Now I find that in my own discipline, the culture has morphed into obey your teachers. You cannot challenge your teachers. One of the reasons why I decided to give up linguistics, I didn't say that to him because it's a painful thing to see your own discipline, going into a culture that you don't want to have. And I suspect that the same thing has happened to the Indian culture as well, though the culture of challenging authority gradually got replaced by culture of obedience. I don't understand how these things happen, but it seems to have. And this happened long before the so-called British took over and changed our culture. They're not to be blamed for any of this. Our culture declined long before they came. Is my guess. Of course, historians might challenge my opinion. I'm not an expert in history to say anything definite. This is simply my impression. It is not a rationally justified conclusion. It's an impression. That's all I can share with you. I can't answer detailed questions.
On that count, let me just add an anecdote and invite you to reflect on this. I'm from Karnataka. There's the city Dharwad in Karnataka, which is supposed to be like the center, probably after Pune, of Hindustani music. So some of the greatest Hindustani classical musicians of this country, Bhimsen Joshi, Gangubai Hangal, Mansur, Mallikarjun Mansur, Kumar Gandharva, all of these, Basavaraj Raj, they all come from this small town. Okay? Today, there is a thriving but a schizophrenic culture of music learning in this city. Every other school-going child learns music at a very high degree of proficiency from a teacher in a sort of a gurukula setting. I mean, they go to their homes and learn there. There's also an illustrious college of music where the same teachers teach, but they're defunct, they're moribund institutions, and they're just about 500 or 800 meters apart. Okay? So here is a tradition of music pedagogy which is vibrant and thriving in a particular setting, and completely moribund in a slightly other, more formalized setting. Now, I'm not the one to ever say, this is, the formal is bad and the informal is good or whatever, but here is an example of how the institution, we have failed to reflect on the institutional background necessary for flourishing of learning, and what does that mean, So I was just wondering if this says something.
Yeah. I am actually in strong support of institutionalized education, formal education. The reason is that in an institution, it's not one teacher, it's multiple teachers. And multiple teachers probably with opposing points of view, opposing pedagogies, opposing goals. That's good for students, dissent. If it is the gurukula system where there is just one guru, there is a handicap. Sure. Okay? There is a high chance of you being indoctrinated into that guru's vision. So what I would love to have is that gurukula system where many gurus come together and many learners come together without the formal requirements of things like exams and credits and so on. Here is my dream university. Imagine, for example, some place like Harvard or MIT, which does not require fees, and they have no admission requirements. Anybody who wants to learn, they will admit you, but they will not give you any paper qualification. They will not give you exams. They will not give you credit. No paper qualification. The only reward is learning itself. Okay? And there are multiple gurus in this university. Now, this is my dream world. I don't think it will happen. But that will be a formal institution of learning without punitive measures, without formal rewards. Learning is its only reward. And I think the world will be a much better place if you can have universities all over the world of that kind. But I know this is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. But we can still try to approximate that pipe dream in many. Once you have the dream, dreams are typically what is not attainable. But dreams are there to inspire you to move in a certain direction. So it is good to have a dream and then move at least 5% towards a dream. That's worth it.
Yes.
To ask is, how do you recognize, like at an institutional level, how do you recognize like good teachers? I mean, I know there are many teachers here, but what I can tell you right now is, back in 10th, for whatever reasons, I had gone to London for something, and therefore I missed some tuition classes which I had for the 10th grade exams. I missed out on trigonometry. Everybody was like, how can you miss out on trigonometry? It's so difficult, and you're going to be dead. They were completely like, obviously over exaggeration, yes, but even the tuition teacher was like, this is very difficult. You have to come back and you have to get the backlog done. I didn't go. I was like, no, I'll get it, I'll learn it when I go to school. And fortunately, even then, you have the assignments, right? They'll give you homework, like do this, do that. So I'm looking at it, I'm looking at the textbook, I'm going like, this is tough stuff. And then I go to that person's class, my teacher's class, right? School. And he does one lecture on trigonometry. Like, it's not even like very advanced stuff. It's basic, instead of saying that when you've got, like, I can't explain it here, 1 minus cos square theta is equal to sine square theta. So what he did was that instead of saying, the usual method of solving it, the question will be asked is sine theta upon 1 plus cos theta is equal to what? So you're supposed to like rationalize it and do it. You're supposed to multiply by 1 plus cos theta and cancel stuff. That is a very, method, that's the method of how you solve stuff. And instead of doing that, what this guy did was, it was a simple, he wrote the equation on the board and he said, I'll just, take this and, divide it on the other side. Just a simple rearrangement. It's nothing, it's not different, it's doing the same thing, but much easier to understand. But the difference was, my tuition teacher was probably a much more qualified person. Let's say he was I don't even remember what he was now, but he was much more qualified than my school teacher, who was like hardly, I think, a BSc or something. So there you see that, academic pedigree does not imply you being a good teacher. So, because like what's happened these days is you go to all of these colleges, they almost always have PhD degree or something like that it's almost a done criteria that you have to have that to be able to teach. So is that right? And how do you recognize good teachers? Because like to do that, you literally have to sit down with them and try to understand something like that. That is, because if you have good teachers, you've got good teachers who will like, do all the things that you say, our job becomes much easier.
Okay, I'll try to sidestep parts of your question and
save us the embarrassment
and answer only certain parts by simply giving you some definitions. So the question that you're asking can be formulated as, what is good teaching? What is excellence in teaching? The answer is, excellence in teaching is that form of teaching that helps students to have valuable learning. So you have to decide what constitutes valuable learning. Some of your examples involve pedagogy, that is strategies to help students certain kinds of learning. But you have to ask, are those the forms of learning that are of value? Okay, so good teaching depends upon good pedagogy depends upon what you aim at. So for example, if the goal of education is to create obedient people, slaves, then the pedagogy should be appropriate for that. If the goal of teaching is to create students who challenge teachers, it will be a different pedagogy. So you have to decide on the value of certain learning outcomes before you can choose your pedagogy. Then your question was, who is a good teacher? Well, if you ask me, a good teacher is somebody who is closest to my way of teaching. That is what everybody will say. There is somebody there who hasn't.
Yeah. Sir, this is my question, that in current times, a lot of attention is given to academic excellence and personal talent. So what about what an institution can do about those students who are neither that academically excellent nor they have those incredible talents in them? So how would the institution encourage them to, come forward and
So the question really is, what does it mean to say academic excellence? If academic excellence means whatever it is that is evaluated in terms of exam results, that is one definition. And I don't personally subscribe to that. And I would say academic excellence is not evaluated by existing systems of education. That was the whole point of what I was trying to say. So you have to figure out what academic excellence is. So for example, a student who gets grade D, does that person have a high degree of academic intelligence? Well, my answer is yes. But thus you have to ask the question, what does it mean to say academic intelligence? This is what I was trying to answer in many of these answers.
You have a question. After this, we could take about the last question or and a half.
No, that.
Having a world triangle. So what my question was that if everyone gets into that kind of understanding, then won't it take much time and much resources than the traditional model is? Because we see every research is in every. I'm basically a BTech student, so I will talk about technical fields like machine learning and artificial intelligence. So maybe all of the researchers are now accepting the current model or the current algorithm and trying to optimize that particular algorithm because it is validated by some person or some technical expert of that time. So if we go by route of that in every kind of problem and every kind of discipline, won't that take much time and much resources, and will not the research be as fast as possible as it is right now?
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that everything in academia should be discovered or constructed by the student. I was only suggesting that students should have that experience of doing some of those things such that students have those mental capacities. Once the student has those mental capacities, you can just leave them to any traditional form of education. It doesn't really matter. Student has become powerful to take any form of, any pedagogy, any type of learning. As for, I don't understand why there is this constant reference to the artificial intelligence, because as I said, artificial intelligence, you can easily show that it hasn't reached anything of the kind that humans can do yet. So it doesn't, artificial intelligence doesn't enter into the picture of academic intelligence. These are not doable in terms of algorithms of the traditional kind. I don't know if at some stage in the history of humanity, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, we'll be able to construct robots which are like Einstein's. It's not impossible, but I haven't seen that kind of thing yet. It hasn't even been able to create even ordinary intelligence. So it's not yet time to discuss that in the context of learning or education. Let me give you a few very simple cases, something that is achievable at the level of the 10th grade. If the students can construct definitions and evaluate definitions across disciplines ranging from mathematics to physical, biological, human sciences and philosophy, that's a good thing. So I can design questions to probe into that ability. If the students can construct classifications and classificatory systems and evaluate them, again, all the way from math to philosophy. That is another learning outcome that, I would say is good. If they can construct, if they are capable of reasoning, of different kinds of reasoning, if they are able to justify their claims, if they are able to unpack implicit assumptions, if they are able to engage in debates in the context of inquiry, not debates to win, but collaborative debates for better learning, not the kind of TV debates of shouting at each other or the rhetorical debates that are practiced in debating competitions. If the students are able to take two concepts and integrate them, these are all learning outcomes that can be tested through questions of the traditional kind, not the MCQs with 5 options, but different kinds of MCQs. I will not go into some of those different MCQs, that's kind of too detailed. Then I would say, okay, these students who are graduating from 10th grade have acquired some of these abilities that I think are valuable. Of course, that also means that the textbooks and the teaching, the entire curriculum should be geared towards that. It is doable. As I said, if you spend 2 hours a week from class 1 to class 10, at the end of class 10, you can design a computer gradable question paper to check if they have acquired these abilities. I've done that in my own teaching, and it is doable. Yeah.
You had a question. We'll wind up with these two questions, unless there is any other question. Okay. One.
Yeah, hello. We're all talking about how the education should be and how the exams should be. But considering a human mind, I'm pretty sure no matter how much ever we try to avoid something, there will be a bias about something, about a subject, about how the question should be. Who's there to decide what is the right question, or what question is the question which is exactly interrelating, and the answer to the question is exactly evaluating the person? That is so subjective that to a point that I feel that there should not be any teacher at all. We can just learn everything on our own. There should not be any exam to a level, because every teacher have their own perspective, their own biases, which they might not be aware of. It will be in their subconscious mind somewhere. But then if they set a paper like that, that paper is not, it's so ideal to develop a paper as such that it's not possible in the practical life. So the paper we're talking about right now, the exams we're talking about right now I think is too ideal to be true. That's what I think.
See, ideals by definition cannot be achieved. But the purpose of ideals is to move in that direction. If you're saying nothing can be accomplished, you're already admitting defeat. Okay? But if you think it is desirable to work towards those ideals, then practical means to achieve them can be accomplished. For instance, a bunch of people who are committed to creating good questions can be educated to develop their ability to construct good exam questions that probe into valuable learning outcomes. You don't need 50,000 people to do that. For school education, for example, it can be created by 15 people. And it is not impossible to find those 15 people. There has to be the will to do it, that's all. So the practical difficulty is that nobody wants to do it, which is why missionary work is necessary. It took a Buddha to change the nature of culture. It took a Socrates to change the nature of culture. It took a Jesus to change the nature of culture. So we need missionaries in education. And then hopefully 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you will be doing it. As he said, the existing generation has to disappear and the new generation will have to take up the challenge of changing the nature of formal education.
Just get it from Ravi.
Hi. Actually, this follows very neatly from the question you just answered, Professor. What I'm struggling with is how logistically how it's possible, because I'm referring to one of your papers that was circulated to us as kind of pre-reading for this talk, is where you said there's mechanical level of questioning, which is the radius is 10 meters, tell me the area of the circle. And then you went into those escalating levels of ropes and goats, where a goat is tethered to a 10-meter rope. How much area will the goat be able to graze? And then you went a step higher, that a goat is tethered to a 10-meter rope but enclosed in a rectangular farm, so how much? And each of these escalations need an aha moment from the student. Aha, the rope, length of the rope is the radius, now I need to work it out. Or aha, the rectangle is now bounding the arc of the circle, so now I have to work it out. So that critical thinking, that inquiring mind comes from these questions at the level 2, 3, and 4, which come with an expiry date. The moment one exam has been set with that question and the aha moment has been revealed, it will quickly get copied, and every coaching class around the street will start circulating copies of that question, and everyone will know that moment you see a question about the rope, it's a radius.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a mechanical question. So then for faculty, for teachers, It's not, if it was just, this is the radius, what's the circle? That is an eternal question, can be asked for hundreds of years. But the goat and the rope question can be asked only once, because the next time the question has now become mechanical and every coaching class is teaching it. So how is it logistically possible with mass education in a structured setting like colleges and universities to continuously come up with these aha moment questions and not make them mechanical?
Yeah, that's a very important question. First of all, let me say, my wife has told me don't attempt anything that has to do with logistics because I'm terrible in that. So whatever I'm going to respond, I'm assuming it is not logistical, because if I claim that, I'll be dead, by day after tomorrow. So I will simply share with you some of my experiences. One of the things that I have found useful is to create a huge question bank, so that if I create large number of questions, even during a certain year, they'll have the same pattern. But if I create different questions at different times, then the trap of going through the same groove will be much less, one. Two, if different people contribute to the question bank, they will try different kinds of questions. So the questions will be varied, but there has to be a huge question bank, and you pick things randomly from that bank. And they should be, of course, tried out and checked and so on. Three, you can create questions with slight variations. The same type of question, but with slight variation. They cannot mimic, the coaching factories cannot give an answer to the question. They will have to teach them how to answer the question of that type, of that category. But if the coaching factories do that, fantastic, they're educating. That is not a problem. In fact, this will be a good thing for coaching factories to do. I would, admire coaching factories who can do that, but my suspicion is that they will not be able to. So these are some of the things that you can do in order to avoid the danger of, if asking the same question, in which case it becomes mechanical. Question bank, large number of people contributing, and changing I do this quite often. I take a previous question and change a couple of things here and there, so that students don't realize it has become a different question. They cannot answer this question by taking the previous question papers. So it may not be perfect, but it will still guide the students in certain ways. And that's okay.
Any absolutely burning last question? Oh, it always has to be you. Oh, okay.
We've gone through this, right? We've done whatever till 10th, whatever 12th, we did this. We studied gravity. We didn't even, question Newton once when he said G m1 m2 upon r square. Is that? We haven't done that so far. I haven't done it. Now, what do we do now? Like, I would be more than willing to dedicate 3-4 hours a week, but where do I go? What do I do? That is the only question I have right now.
The only thing I can think of is go to the ThinQ website, www.thinq.education. You have a huge bunch of learning materials there. Try them out. There are courses, there are PDF materials, there are videos. That will take a huge amount of your time. And you can, if you're interested in learning, you can learn from those things. We are producing those materials such that students can learn on their own from those materials. And then, of course, there'll be gradually, we hope there'll be people who are creating similar materials and incorporating them into their own teaching. But until then, students can learn on their own.
So do you have the videos for, like, let's say, heliocentricity? Like,
yes.
Do you have the observations for that there?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll definitely be checking that out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And attend classes regularly here.
Yeah, I have 100% attendance so far. Don't worry. What it will be?
I don't know. I just work with hope. Like, this is a kind of hope this is almost a Don Quixote type hope to achieve what is impossible. But without that hope, life is not worth living. So I do this because I can't not do it, not because I think it will be done during my lifetime, but I hope that it might happen. There's a possibility that it might happen, after my lifetime. That's all I can say.
Okay, on that note, Professor Mohanan, before we close, I just want you to do something for us. Can you share with us some names of 3 to 5 books, titles that have influenced you, so that it sort of stays in our memory when we go back?
Things which have inspired me and I kind of recommend, like the Bible. One of them I mentioned, Einstein and Feld. Another one that had a deep influence on me is Concepts of Modern Mathematics by Ian Stewart.
Okay.
Third, Polya, George Polya, How to Solve It, but more importantly, Plausible Reasoning in Mathematics. Polya, I am a big fan of Polya, he's my hero. Maurice Klein, Uncertainty in Mathematics. Lots of Feynman videos.
Sure.
If you want to, there is a popular stuff, Adventures of a Curious Character and that kind of stuff. There are also popular videos, but there is also the Feynman lectures proper. If I don't understand why the Feynman lectures are not part of actual physics curriculum. Peter Singer, Animal Liberation. A lot of Russell. This is just random. You said
Sure.
3, this is more than 3, I think that is.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Pratishtha?
I think if good teaching had to initiate critical thinking, and if critical thinking had to begin with questioning the received quote-unquote wisdom, then I would say it comes very naturally to all of us. I mean, anybody who has got anything to do with 2 little kids at home would agree with me that no matter, despite all your training, the first word that they learn to ask, they learn to say why before they can learn to say okay. So I think it comes quite naturally to us. But today's session has got many more lessons for us teachers on this side than the students on other sides, or maybe as many as there are for students as well as for teachers. I thank Professor K P Mohanan sincerely for giving your time and for making us rethink about what is the purpose of all that we are doing in the classroom. To rethink about what can be, if I use kind of borrow phrase words, what can be a pedagogy of questions, what can be hope when we are teaching, and what kind of things we're dreaming of. So thank you very much for that. I request one of the volunteers to kindly give him a token of our gratitude.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohanan. And we couldn't have found a better person than my dear friend and colleague, Ashwin Kumar, to lead this conversation today with Professor Mohanan, with his interest and passion for language, philosophy, rhetoric. Thank you very much, Ashwin, for being here and agreeing to it so readily. I request Kalyana to do that. And of course, I thank all of you here who not only register in large numbers, but then even come. So thank you very much for coming here. The next second best part of the event is to have an informal conversation with our guest while we are eating dinner in the airport area. I welcome you all there. Thank you.